Welcome back to PC-98 Paradise, the series where we take a close look at classic games for the NEC PC-98, the most popular Japanese PC series of the early 1990s. I'm Mr. Jakes. Record of Lodoss War is probably best known to English speakers as an anime, first released as a video series in 1990. But the origins of Lodoss War actually go back further. It was 1986 or earlier when series creator Ryo Mizuno first invented the world of the series as campaigns for his Dungeons & Dragons group. Then, through connections his group had, he was able to get replays of these gaming sessions published in Comptique Computer magazine. A replay is where the events of a particular tabletop gaming session are written down in the form of an entertaining story. People enjoyed these replays so much, he landed a deal for the publisher of the magazine to release an entire series of short novels based on the world, beginning in 1988, and it was these novels that served as the main basis for the series thereafter. It must have been almost a foregone conclusion that a computer game would be made as well. After all, it did first appear in a computer magazine. The very first Record of Lodoss War video game, the one I'm going to be playing today, was released in the same year as the first novel, 1988, so this game predates the anime series by 2 years. The game, titled Hairo no Majo, which is the same title as the first novel and means The Grey Witch, was made by Hummingbird Soft. Hummingbird Soft was a game developer that almost exclusively made RPGs, and are probably best known for the Deep Dungeon series on the Famicom and La Place no Ma. By 1988, they were already well established, and the Lodoss War games would become a huge hit for them on the PC-98. And while the PC-98 version is the version I'm going to be playing today, it was also released simultaneously in 1988 for the MSX2 and the PC-88 VA, the short-lived 16-bit variant of the PC-88. In later years, the game was released for yet 4 more PCs, and there was even one console remake of the game. Any Lodoss War games you don't see here, like the ones for the Super Famicom or Mega CD, are not the same game, and I won't be talking about those today. So let's get on with it and take a look at the PC-98 version of the very first Lodoss War game. It comes in a large clamshell case. Inside, the playing manual is in black and white and blue. You can see that the way the characters were supposed to look were already well established by this point, thanks to these illustrations from the novels drawn by Yutaka Izubuchi. Next, the spellbook is exactly what it sounds like. Then there's a map of Lodoss Island, the setting of the series. You may be able to see that one of the previous owners of this game decided to write some notes on it. The game itself is stored on just 2 1.2 megabyte floppy disks, consisting of the program and scenario disks. To start, we'll simply insert the program disk in drive 1 and scenario disk in drive 2. Since this is a pretty old game, I eventually decided to turn my CPU speed down to CPU mode middle to play this one. Being from 1988, this is the oldest game I've played on PC-98 Paradise, other than Princess Tomato in the Salad Kingdom. Usually when I do games from the 80s, we're still in PC-88 territory. Anyway, here we go. There's a short opening sequence which shows a blue head wearing the circlet that will play a large role in the story. We see the names of the 2 main series creators, Ryo Mizuno as well as Hitoshi Yasuda, who together formed the tabletop RPG company Group SNE. The head on screen eventually dissolves, leaving behind the circlet and finally only its eyes. Those eyes kind of remind me of something. Then there's the title logo, and the opening ends with a long text description introducing the world of the series. Lodoss is a cursed island, covered in dungeons and populated by humans, elves, and dwarves.
Just like elves, gremlins, and Eskimos.
We also get a description of some of the kingdoms and leaders of those kingdoms. I haven't watched the original anime series in over 20 years, and I made an active decision not to rewatch it before making this video. After all, this game was made before the anime was even a thing, and I really want to judge this game on its own merits. It was a super popular RPG on Japanese PCs. As usual, apologies to fans of the series if I get anything wrong. So during the opening sequence, you can press enter or left click with the mouse to load a previous game. But first we're going to create a user disk, and you're going to have to do this even if you're playing using disk images you found online, since trying to continue using a fresh user disk will just give you a bugged up party of 6 warriors on level 0. During the opening, you press escape or right click instead to enter a menu where you can choose create or backup user disk. Choose create and we're asked to move the scenario disk to drive 1 and put a blank disk in drive 2. Once it's done creating the user disk, it will have you put the program disk back in drive 1, and the character creation menu that comes up next is the important part to make sure you don't just get a bugged party. You can select 4 different races: human, elf, dwarf, or half-elf, and then man or woman. From there you get 5 bonus points to assign to your desired stats, and where you choose to assign them determines which classes you're able to choose from. And finally, of course, you can name your character. But rather than creating my own characters, I'm going to play as the characters from the series. And in order to do that, you just go straight to Start Game without creating any characters. You'll begin the game as Gim, the dwarf. Here at the inn, you can talk to other patrons or stay the night for a fee, which also allows you to save your game. You only get 1 save slot per user disk. So next I'm going to leave the inn for the village square. Well, howdy ladies. I'm just moseying around this Lodoss War village here. Well, anyway, to begin the story, let's go to the temple. There, Niece asks us to save her daughter, Lelia, who was kidnapped from the temple 7 years ago. This will be the main object of the game. Next, I want to get a few more of my party members, but to do that, we've got to move down to the next town. You can use either the keyboard or the mouse to move your character, but the scrolling is a little smoother if you use the mouse. I make it to the town without being attacked, and at the inn there we can talk to a villager, a young knight, a priest, and a robed man. I feel like there must be a joke to be made here about these characters walking into a bar. But anyway, the bottom 3 turn out to be Parn, Eto, and Slain, the warrior, priest, and sorcerer of the series. So now that we have a sizable party, let's move on and do the first scenario of the game. The game's story is divided into a number of different required scenarios, as well as a few optional ones. In this first one, the mayor of the town wants us to get rid of some goblins for him. While we're in the town, by the way, we can also go to the market to buy and sell items and equipment, but the pre-made characters already come loaded out. One thing though is that Parn begins with a bunch of equipment named after himself, like the Parn sword. This equipment sucks, and you'll probably want to replace it as soon as you can. So this time we do get into a battle, and it's a pretty standard battle system. You do have LP instead of HP, I guess that's life points. You select actions like attack, defend, magic for each character, and watch things play out for each turn. This isn't a player-friendly game, so of course your characters will still try to attack enemies even after they're gone, so be careful about that. Oh yeah, and I don't usually stop the video to give photosensitivity warnings, but you're probably not going to want to watch these battles if you have trouble watching flashing lights. The whole screen flashes like crazy whenever anyone gets hit. The sound effects are also pretty terrible, so it's an all-out assault on your senses. Anyway, I'm going to show it now. So in another battle, it looks like Slain has been slain. That has got to be the oldest Lodoss War joke for English-speaking fans. Back in town we can go to the temple, which is where we'll revive dead characters and cure status ailments. The loading time between battles is really terrible. To address this, Hummingbird Soft eventually created the so-called turbo version of the game. This was sold via mail order. Apparently fans who had registered the game received a postcard in the mail asking them to buy it for a few thousand yen. Luckily nowadays, a disk image is floating around on the internet. The only differences in this version are that it uses all 640 kilobytes of the system's main RAM, and a few of the menus have been improved. I went back and forth on whether I should play this version or not, so some of my footage here is from the turbo version. But in the interest of experiencing the horrible menus the same way that most people actually experience them, I eventually decided to just use my original disc for the game, but with ER Cache. ER Cache is a tool I usually use to slow down the CPU or fix other issues in certain games, but its main function is actually right in the name. It caches data from the floppy disks in RAM to decrease loading time. Anyway, nearby the town we can find the hideout of the goblins. Slane says that it's an awfully clean-looking hideout for a bunch of goblins. We do get little comments from characters here and there throughout the game when playing as the actual Lodoss characters. I don't know how he knows the place is clean though, since like most dungeons in the game, it starts out dark. You have to use a torch or the light spell when you first enter. The menus are quite cumbersome here in the non-turbo version of the game. After right-clicking to get the camp menu, you have to first select status and then the character, and then click through both status screens before you get to a menu where you can access that character's magic, items, or equipment. You get used to it, but it's still a lot of clicking to perform simple tasks. Anyway, now that things have been lit up, we can see that the dungeons in this game play in first person. There are spells to see your immediate surroundings, but for the most part you're on your own drawing maps, unless you use a guidebook from back in the day or a modern walkthrough. The game's favorite trick is secret passages which can be accessed by just walking through walls, so good luck figuring these dungeons out without a map. Even using one, I still managed to get lost in some of the later dungeons. Inside the secret room in this dungeon, we have a couple of treasure chests, which are also invisible until you stand on the exact space where they're located. There are battles on predetermined spaces, in addition to random battles that some of the dungeons also have. While in the dungeons, you get a choice to play the battles through tactical combat. This is the only part of the game where the ever-present mouse cursor actually pulls its weight. If you know how to play the tactical combat well, you might get a better result than you would with the regular battles, but I usually chose to forego the tactical combat for easy monsters in order to save time. By the way, after each battle, you can choose to take a short break to restore some of the party's MP. LP can be restored using Eto's magic. In this first dungeon, you'll find a boss, who turns out to be a dark elf controlling the goblins. In the boss battles, you have no choice but to use the tactical combat. After defeating them, we return to the mayor, who gives us a very modest cash reward. But much more importantly, we get a huge experience bonus for clearing each scenario. This is the main way you earn experience in the game. Almost everyone gets a level up. Hey, I really should have gotten my last 2 party members before doing this. To get them, we just continue down to the first city of the game. In the inn here we can find Woodchuck, and of course the elf Deedlit, the most popular character of the series for obvious reasons. Woodchuck's character class is Scout, which is a class not very good for anything other than disabling traps in the dungeons. Here he tells us that there's an abandoned house in the forest where spies are plotting against the king. I'll maybe just put the names of some of the kingdoms and royalty on screen throughout the video for fans of the series who care. So anyway, we go to the abandoned house to start the next scenario. This dungeon is a bit more complicated, with multiple floors and bosses. We'll find a painting of a beautiful woman, with a letter in front of it. We'll have to use Slane's spell called Read Language to figure out that the letter contains details of a plot to assassinate the king. So back at the city, we can go to the castle, but there we can only enter a tournament where we have to win 3 difficult battles. This was the only part of the game where I had to do some grinding before I could win. When we do finally win the tournament, we'll receive some money, a good sword, and the experience for finishing the scenario. While we have the attention of the king, the party takes the opportunity to show him the letter plotting to assassinate him. So now the plot will be foiled and the king will survive. But if you don't complete this scenario before moving on to the next kingdom, the king will die and the kingdom will fall, jeopardizing your chances of getting the good ending. At any time in the camp menu, you can open a screen showing the current balance of power. It shows which kingdoms on Lodoss Island still exist and whether they have pledged their support to help the party. You're going to want to tip the scale in your favor before heading out for the final dungeon. To get to the next kingdom, we can take one of two routes. The easier one goes through Deedlit's forest, but it's hard to find the secret pathway through. You have to stand in the exact right spot before Deedlit will show you the way. So I ended up coming back to do the scenario here later to get the experience. You'll get a pretty naughty shot of Deedlit when she lets you stay at her house to save your game. But first I actually took the much more obvious, albeit more difficult, route through the pyramid, where you have to fight multiple bosses in one go. Before one of them, Deedlit will say, "Slain, your sleep cloud spell won't work on spirit creatures," to which Slain will reply, "Oh yeah, well your sleep spell won't work either." Woodchuck ends it with, "Just shut up and get ready to fight." These little exchanges sure add a lot of character to the game, sort of like a conversation you'd have between players in a tabletop RPG. Unfortunately, such conversations only come once in a blue moon in this game. This is by far the most complicated dungeon yet, which first introduces the ladders we'll use in order to traverse floors in most of the dungeons. The funny thing is that just after you go up or down one, the game will ask you right away if you want to climb the ladder again, so you have to be ready to select no. Wow, what a clunky interface. Another thing you'll have to get used to is the loot system in this game. When you find a chest, first it will ask you who will open it, and you're going to want to use Woodchuck every time or risk getting poisoned by a trap. The items inside the chests will at first have only a vague description of what they are with a question mark next to them. You can equip them like this if you want, but there's a chance the equipment is cursed and you'll become unable to remove it. You need to go to the Wizards College in the cities, where they can not only uncurse equipment for you, but they also can appraise any item or equipment for a fee. Then you'll be able to see that what you have is a +1 broadsword or whatever, and whether or not it's cursed. You even have to do this when you find potions to find out whether you have a heal potion or an antidote or even poison. One thing to be careful about with cursed equipment is that once it's been equipped, uncursing it will cause the equipment to disappear. So if it's something you want to keep after removing it, ideally you're going to want to uncurse it before equipping. Anyway, once you get through the pyramid, a path through the desert will open. When you follow it into the next kingdom, immediately a sequence of graphics and dialogue will take place. The woman from the painting earlier is trying to kidnap the princess of the kingdom. Before the battle, the princess warns us to be careful of that woman. She's a sorceress, and she's right to be wary, because this is an unwinnable battle where all of our characters will fall unconscious from her stun cloud magic. The party will awaken inside a new dungeon that we'll have to find our way out of. There we'll run into the princess again and take her back to her kingdom. Outside we'll be found by the king's men, and the king thanks us for saving his daughter. We learn that the woman we fought earlier claims to be the legendary sorceress, Carla, but the real Carla lived ages ago. In order to have a chance against such an enemy, the king says we'll need the help of a great sage named Wart, whose name for some reason makes me thirsty. But he can't just send a bunch of strangers out on such an important job. His knights wouldn't approve, he says. And so, to prove our worth, the king asks us to defeat the Minotaur on the island south of town. Wow, even before he'll let us help him, he has to test us. Before we go, the princess makes sure to tell Eto to be careful. So we take a boat to an island south of town, where we have to go through quite a large labyrinth before we can defeat the Minotaur. Then the king tells us how to find Wart. The princess tells Eto to be careful. Here, though, is where I decided to go back and do all the optional scenarios, so let's briefly talk about some of those. The first one I did is totally skippable since all it gives you is an unusable weapon and 0 experience. Yet it is one of the most interesting scenarios, where one of the inns becomes a first-person dungeon where you have to solve a murder mystery. We meet a detective named Langer who can talk to the dead, and we use the detection spell to find clues. When we do find the culprit, we'll fight and defeat him, and that's it. The rest of the optional scenarios are very much worth doing, since they'll reward you with a ton of experience. On the pirate ship Wyvern, I encountered my only fatal bug. In one room on the ship with a bunch of windows overlooking the harbor on one side, both of the ladders to get out of the room suddenly disappeared and I couldn't get them to respawn. With no way out, I had no choice but to reset and load my last save. The next time I did this dungeon, to be safe, I used the turbo version instead because it's a newer version of the game and might have some bug fixes. Though I'm sure the bug doesn't occur every time, even with the original disc either. And on the subject of bugs, a common one is that weapons often suddenly become unequipped. Actually, I'm not 100% sure that's a bug. Maybe it happens for a reason, but it's annoying in any case. On the pirate ship, we'll find a crown, which we can sell back in town for 20,000 gold, plus some information. That information turns out to be a password to get into a secret market in town, and the password happens to be the number of the beast. I could have guessed that. There we learn of a powerful item called the Rune Staff, guarded by a dragon, leading into our next optional scenario where we need to defeat the dragon and find it. It was definitely worth doing for the experience, but the Rune Staff can unfortunately only be equipped by a wizard. Slain is a sorcerer, Eto is a priest, and Deedlit is a shaman. You would need to create a wizard character if you wanted to use it. There's another scenario where you'll find a lost village surrounded by mist and explore it as a dungeon, and another where you'll rescue a girl from some trolls and then travel to the cave of the trolls where you'll find 3 stones to raise the intelligence of your 3 magic users, so you'll definitely want to do this one. And as long as we have the status window open here, isn't it funny how physical beauty is a stat? They didn't even bother to make it charisma or charm, it's just physical beauty. And oh yeah, the magic users are all cult members. This actually just shows which god they follow. Okay, let's get back to the required scenarios. We were supposed to find a sage named Wart, right? To get to him, we've got to pass through the great tunnel of the dwarves. At the entrance, we'll fight a bunch of followers of Carla, but with all the experience from the optional scenarios, I pretty much made a mockery of most of the remaining battles in the game. Inside, we'll meet the Dwarf King, who watches over the ruins of his kingdom, and on the other side of the tunnel, we'll get to the Tower of Wart. Throughout the tower, Wart will quiz us with questions about Lodoss Island and the larger world of Forcelia it resides in. Wart will reveal a lot when we meet him in the dungeon, so I'll put a spoiler warning here for those who don't want me to spoil the old 1990 anime series. Wart tells us that Carla isn't a person anymore. She's the circlet that rests upon her head. When the old kingdom was destroyed 500 years ago, she put her spirit into the circlet in order to grant herself eternal life. Now she controls the body of whoever wears the circlet, and she's been affecting the fate of Lodoss from the shadows ever since. The only way to defeat her is with a silver wand which seals away magic, and the wand is hidden somewhere in this tower. He also gives us some hints on how to find Carla's castle before saying goodbye. So anyway, we'll defeat some golems elsewhere in the tower and get the wand. But when we get back to the castle with the princess, she informs us that her father went off to war in another kingdom. She begs us to help him, and of course, she tells Eto to be careful. We get there just on time to see her father being killed by the king of the other kingdom. We'll then finish that other king off and find all the best equipment in the game laying there on the floor after the battle. Why, where did all these come from? Slain by this time has an appraisal spell, so we don't need to take the equipment all the way to the Wizards College to have it appraised. I equipped it all right here. Back at the castle, we tell the princess the bad news about her father. She notices the awesome new equipment we're wearing, and she informs us that those were her father's, and asks us to let her have them as a keepsake. Oh, well then, nah, it's all mine now. She then asks us to at least put them to good use. The walkthrough says that this might have some small effect on whether you get the good ending or not, but if you've been doing everything right up until now, you're probably good to just keep them. Anyway, more importantly, she makes sure to tell Eto to be careful. So now with all other scenarios completed, we have nothing left to do but set off to what they call the Deepest Labyrinth, which is a long dungeon leading to the island with Carla's castle. There we'll fight some more followers of Carla, but the castle dungeon itself is actually quite short. Carla tells us that she's been waiting, and before the battle, Gim shouts, "Lelia, wake up!" This battle is pretty hard, but my party was still able to take her down on my first try. The funny thing is that you don't even have to use the wand Wart told us to find. If you do, it will also make the party unable to use magic for the rest of the battle, so it's a trade-off. I actually found it easier without using the wand. In the ending, a bard tells us how the world was returned to light, and then introduces our 6 heroes. This is set to a blatant copy of the Pomp and Circumstance graduation march. The game's stuff is shown over the ending graphics, which begins with the circlet lying broken on the floor. Wow, this ending is a lot happier than I remember in the anime. There is apparently also a bad ending, but I would have had to play all the way through the game again in order to see it. Next, Slain is shown returning Lelia to her mother, and finally, well, it's a good thing Eto remembered to be careful, I guess. These last 2 images in the ending only appear if you're playing as the characters from the series. Finally, you're given a password. You would send this password on this form in the manual to receive a certificate for finishing the game. But we're not quite done yet. There were expansion discs released for both this game and its sequel on the PC-98 called Lodoss Tou Senki Fukujinzuke. Fukujinzuke are pickled vegetables usually eaten as an add-on to curry rice, making it the perfect name for a game add-on. Inside we have a single floppy disk and a short paper manual. You don't actually need the original game to use Fukujinzuke. We'll just go ahead and boot the disc. We get some cute SD versions of the characters at the title before the menu. First, there's a slide puzzle. Always gotta have one of those. Next is the tactical game, which sort of resembles the tournament in the game. For this part, you can use your user disc from the main game in order to fight as your party. Next, there's a sound gallery, which was the most useful part of this disc for me, so I could capture the background music for this video. And finally, you've got some Q&A with series creator Ryo Mizuno. That's it. Speaking of the sound gallery, I was at first generally unimpressed with the music in this game. It has a bit of a harsh and cheap sound to it, but strangely there are some nice sounding tunes buried in this one if you stick around long enough. In the end, I would say it's decent enough for 1988. The game was released simultaneously, or at least nearly simultaneously, for the PC-98 VA. The PC-98 VA, once again, is a rare 16-bit version of the PC-88. While internally the PC-88 VA is very different from the PC-98, it tended to produce similar results, and so this version is almost exactly the same as the PC-98 version. The scrolling does seem quite a bit faster on the overworld, I'll give it that. This one also has the same improved menu layouts as the turbo version on the PC-98, leading me to believe that the PC-98 version is probably the earliest version of the game. This version is so similar to the PC-98 version, in fact, that while messing around switching discs back and forth, I was eventually sort of able to load a game save from the PC-88 VA version on the PC-98. However, the game seems to have realized something isn't right and triggered some sort of secondary copy protection. Now the character's default status is criminal, and some of them start with the status ailments hentai and loli. This is actually a great example of the sort of secondary copy protection some Japanese developers would implement in their old PC games. If they couldn't manage to stop you from copying their game, maybe they could at least mock you for doing it. Okay, on to the other ports. The last of the 3 original versions was for the MSX2. This one has nicely redrawn MSX graphics and really excellent music if you have an FM pack. The compositions really shine for the first time here. The game doesn't use a mouse, which at least makes the overworld scroll a little smoother without that cursor to screw things up. The positives end there, unfortunately. Some of the graphics in the towns are missing, probably due to the smaller disk capacity on the MSX. You're also constantly changing disks in this version. The loading time is atrocious too. Most puzzling of all, they seem to have made all the battles use tactical combat only, making sure that this will be the most time-consuming version of the game. Maybe you might want to play this one on an emulator where at least there's usually a setting to skip the disk access time. I believe there is a partial English patch available for this one too. Those were the only 3 versions, until 3 years later when it was finally ported to the X68000. They made a lot of improvements here, streamlining the menus, especially in combat. This one gives you the choice of tactical combat even on the overworld, and the scrolling is pretty smooth even when using the keyboard. This version is made to be played almost exclusively with the mouse, forcing you to use the drop-down menus at the top of the screens for almost everything in the towns. This is also the first version to have stereo FM sound, so the music is also really good here. Overall, a very nice version of the game. In 1992, Hudson Soft did a remake of the game on the PC Engine. While based on the same story and scenarios, it's a totally different game with a different map layout and soundtrack. This one has only the set cast of characters from the series who join the party at set points in the story. As a PC Engine CD-ROM game, of course it has cutscenes featuring the voice cast from the anime. The menus and interface have been greatly simplified and modernized to make it play more like a typical early 90s console RPG. The first-person dungeons have been replaced with standard overhead ones. The battle system is basically the tactical combat from the PC game, but it goes by very quickly, especially with the very convenient auto-battle feature. Since it usually makes really good decisions on its own, the battles feel maybe a little too easy. It's definitely a very player-friendly game. And as a longtime PC Engine fan, I can't believe I haven't sat down and played this one before. I've had it just sitting here. It's a very fun game. But even after that Hudson remake, Hummingbird Soft wasn't done releasing PC versions of the game. The next one was Hairo no Majo CD for the PC-9821, so this one is actually a more appropriate version of the game for my PC-98. But I wanted to play through the original 9801 version for the main section of the video. This one is basically the original game, but with the graphics all replaced and the FM sound cleaned up a little. There's also CD music for the opening and ending. In the HUD, it looks like there's a max of 8 characters now, but it's still actually 6. The extra spaces in the HUD are there for the sequel. The battle system is basically the one from the X68000 version, but here they replaced the non-tactical battles with something new called Turbo Battles. And of course, the menus have been greatly improved. Overall, a slightly more modern way to play the game on PC-98. And it was this PC-9821 version that was ported to the FM towns. This version uses the same graphics, menus, and the same CD audio in the opening and ending. The one weird thing about this version is that it uses the soundtrack from the sequel during the actual game. I guess they didn't want to bother also arranging the first game's soundtrack for the FM towns. And they actually did the exact same thing for the very last version of the game. The 1997 Windows 95 version uses crappy MIDI arrangements of the soundtrack from the second game. As you can probably tell, this is another one based on the 9821 and FM Towns versions. And given how it uses the default Windows interface, it is very much a product of its time. Record of Lodoss War is so much more than an anime. It's even more than a novel series or tabletop RPG. It was one of the most popular PC games in the late 80s in Japan. Seriously, this is one of the most common PC-98 titles you'll find on the used market. I think I used to have a copy of this one that I never played that I got rid of back in like 2006, before rebuying the game again for this video. I can see why I wasn't interested in the game back then. The game is anything but user-friendly, requiring tons of clicks in order to get things done. And with item and equipment menus that are so hard to keep track of, I went full grandpa mode and took pictures of the status screen with my phone in order to keep track of what my characters had. There's no way to see all the information you need when selling or appraising items, in the original version anyway. Things like the appraisal system and scenarios reminded me a bit of Sorcerian, released the previous year, though I'm sure both ideas actually originate from earlier RPGs than that. So anyway, I had a lot of trouble learning to play and navigate this game. Even with a walkthrough, it wasn't easy, so you might be surprised to hear that overall, I feel like I had a really good time with this one. It offered just the right amount of antiquated cryptic interfaces, dry-looking 1988 graphics and sound, and a bare-bones story to make me feel like I was discovering some Japanese PC RPG that time forgot. And there's something I find really satisfying about successfully learning to play such games, even if it's all thanks to a walkthrough. And on top of that, I even found that the battles are actually pretty forgiving, and the game requires very little, if any, grinding. Seeing each character earn a ton of experience after each scenario is super satisfying for some reason too, like in Sorcerian. So while this one is definitely not for everyone, it's a game that was loved by many in its time, and one that some weirdos like me might still even enjoy learning today. But for the rest of you, fans of the Lodoss War series or not, I hope you enjoyed learning about this game. Thanks for watching this episode of PC-98 Paradise. This video was a request from my longtime patron, David Shadoff. Thanks to him for suggesting a game I probably would have skipped over otherwise. I also want to give a huge thanks to the other patrons as usual, as well as all of you for watching. Hope to see you back again next time.